It was a small moment, one that seemed insignificant at the time, my mother tossing my grandfather's favorite chess book into the trash with a laugh. She didn't know, though, that inside the hollowed-out pages lay a secret that would unravel everything. To her, it was just an old book, something she had no use for. But to me, it was the key to a plan that would turn the tables on a family who thought they had all the power. I knew in that instant that silence would be my greatest weapon. They thought they could take everything from me, but they underestimated what my grandfather had left behind. And now it was my turn to make the move. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. I remember that moment like it happened in slow motion. My fingers trembled as I carefully lifted the book from the kitchen table, its cover now stained with champagne. The air around me was still thick with the tension of what I had just discovered. I'd wiped away the sticky liquid with a cloth, thinking the book was ruined. I was wrong. The truth was hidden inside, and I hadn't even known it was there until I'd held it in my hands the way my grandfather had so often guided me to. I had been wiping down the cover when something caught my eye, a slight indentation, a crease along the spine that didn't belong. My heart skipped a beat. Slowly, I peeled back the pages, careful not to damage them any further. And there it was, a hidden compartment, one I'd never noticed before, nestled inside the spine of the book. My breath caught in my throat as I pulled out the small envelope tucked away so carefully. I hadn't even known it existed, and yet it was right there in front of me. My mind raced. I hesitated for only a moment, staring at the envelope. There was no turning back now. The weight of the decision hung heavy, but my curiosity and maybe something darker pushed me forward. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside, I found the most unexpected thing: my grandfather's original notarized will. It wasn't a copy. It wasn't something I'd imagined. This was the real deal, the one my mother had never seen, the one that proved everything. As I read through the document, it became clear. The house, the estate, everything my mother had been lying, the deed she was using to sell the house, wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. It was a fake, and my name, not hers, was listed as the rightful heir to everything. The room seemed to spin as I absorbed the magnitude of what I was holding. This wasn't just a will. This was proof that my mother had been committing fraud, using a false deed to sell off what wasn't hers to sell. The realization hit me like a jolt of electricity, sharp and sudden. It wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate. My mother had known that Grandpa had left everything to me, but she had decided to erase me from the equation. She'd taken advantage of my silence, my absence, thinking I wouldn't notice or fight back. She had been using her charm and her manipulation to secure the house for herself, treating me like a non-entity. I had been invisible to them, just a shadow, a part of the furniture in their world. They thought they could erase me completely, but now I had the proof, the one thing they hadn't counted on. My grandfather's legacy wasn't just a house. It was a weapon, a shield, and now it was in my hands. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the weight of it sink in. I had a choice. I could confront them right then, waving the document in their faces, demanding what was rightfully mine. But I knew that wouldn't work. My mother would tear it up. She would claim it was a forgery or accuse me of fabricating the whole thing. She would drag it into court, making the process long and expensive, and in the end, I'd have nothing. No, I couldn't do that. The stakes were higher than that. I wanted more than just the house. I wanted justice. the kind that couldn't be erased by lies or manipulation. I looked at the book in my hands. One last time, the cover still soaked with champagne, and made a decision. I would stay quiet. I wouldn't reveal the truth just yet. I would let them keep believing they had everything under control. I would wait. And when they made their next move, I would be ready to strike. Silence would be my weapon. The truth would be my trap. They would make the wrong move, and when they did, it would be too late. I slipped the will back into the envelope, then carefully into my tote bag under my spare sweater. I wiped the counter clean, taking one last look at the room before I left. My mother, oblivious to the storm brewing in her own home, was already moving forward with her plans, and I, the silent observer, would be the one to watch them unfold one step at a time. But this time, I would be the one controlling the game. I made the decision then, right in the quiet of that kitchen, to hold my silence. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way. If I showed my hand too soon, they'd figure it out, tear the will apart, and bury me under the weight of their lies. But if I waited, if I let them think they were in control, then they would make a mistake. A mistake that would bring the truth crashing down on them. I had to be patient. My silence would be the tool they would use to dig their own grave. So I played along, did what I was expected to do. I stayed in the background the same way I had for years, while they carried on with their plans, completely unaware that I was watching, always watching. Each day, I held back, clenched my jaw, and swallowed down the frustration. It ate at me, but I knew it was part of the game. I had to let them play their hand first. For the next 2 weeks, I was invisible again. My mother Brenda and my brother William were so consumed with their own plans that they didn't even notice me. I spent my days polishing the windows, cleaning the floors, refilling wine glasses at family gatherings, doing everything to blend into the background. It was like I didn't exist. They treated me like a servant, someone to do their bidding without ever asking for anything in return. I wasn't family, I was furniture. My mother, her eyes always fixed on the next target, was relentless. She kept talking about selling the house, moving on with her life. The house that wasn't hers to sell, the house that belonged to me. I could feel the knot of anger tightening in my chest each time she mentioned it, but I kept my face blank, my lips sealed. I wasn't going to give them any clue that I knew the truth. My brother, on the other hand, was more predictable. He was already thinking about how to spend the money they planned to get from the sale of the house. He'd always been reckless, careless, a man who thought with his wallet, never with his head. I watched him from the corner of the room, barely able to hide my disgust. He'd been so confident that everything was going to work out, that he would get his hands on the money and live his life without a care. He didn't realize that the deeper they dug, the further they buried themselves in this lie. But I wasn't going to stop them, not yet. The day they decided to move forward with their plan, the one that would finally pull them into criminal territory, was inevitable. It came, of course, when Brenda started talking about loans. She had debts, big debts. The kind that didn't just go away, the kind that followed you like shadows, getting darker and more insistent. She was desperate. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she held herself now, more tense, more impatient. The money she thought she would get from the sale wasn't coming fast enough. So she started talking about a bridge loan. My brother didn't hesitate to jump in. He was always ready to throw money at a problem, no matter the cost, as long as it didn't inconvenience him. A bridge loan, he explained, was quick. It didn't matter that the title search wasn't complete. They could still use the house as collateral. They could get the cash up front and everything would be taken care of. I could hear the desperation in his voice, the greed. The thought of that $500,000 wired straight into his account made his eyes shine. I watched them both as they discussed the details, the developer who was going to buy the house, the title that hadn't cleared, and how none of that really mattered in the grand scheme of things. They had the deed, and that was all they cared about. But I knew better. I knew that the deed they had wasn't worth anything. They were using a forged document, one that didn't hold up to scrutiny. They were preparing to commit a crime, and they didn't even realize it. I should have felt rage. I should have felt like charging and demanding what was mine, telling them to stop before it was too late. But I didn't. I stayed quiet. I had to. I had to let them walk right into the trap. They made it so easy. Every conversation, every step they took was another nail in their coffin. They were making the same mistakes over and over again, and I was standing on the sidelines just waiting for the moment when they would take that final irrevocable step. And then it came. Brenda decided it was time to go through with the loan. She was ready to sign. William, of course, had no second thoughts. His greed had taken over completely. They were going to use the house as collateral, sign a bunch of documents, and get $500,000 wired straight to their account. They had no idea they were stepping into a federal crime. They thought they had everything figured out. They didn't know I was watching. They didn't know I was waiting. Every detail they discussed made my pulse race, but I kept my face neutral. The silence was the hardest part. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them what I knew, but I didn't. I kept my mouth shut, my hands steady. My gaze focused on their every move. The trap was closing slowly, surely. They didn't even know it. It was a day like any other, or at least that's how it felt at first. The morning air was heavy with humidity, the kind that made everything feel damp, like the whole house was waiting for something. I'd been cleaning, of course, just another chore to pass the time while the world outside moved at a pace I couldn't control. But this day, something felt different. I could hear their voices in the next room, Brenda's sharp tones cutting through the house as she talked on the phone. William's voice, too low and casual, was a constant in the background. I knew they were planning something. I had to force myself to stay quiet, to keep my hands steady as I wiped down the windows. I'd been watching them long enough to know that today was the day they would make their move. They had no idea how close they were to making a fatal mistake. It started with Brenda pacing around the sunroom, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. William was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, indifferent to the tension building in the room. They had been talking about the house for days now, how the sale was stalled, how the developer had backed out because of the title issues. But now Brenda was pushing. She couldn't wait. The creditors were calling, she said. The money was needed now. I could hear her desperation, the rawness in her voice as she demanded answers. William, as usual, wasn't paying much attention, but when he did speak, it was always with that tone of self-assurance that drove me mad. He didn't care how the money came. He just wanted to get his hands on it. He had never cared about the details. He just wanted the payoff. Get a bridge loan, he told her, casually tossing the words around like they meant nothing. A hard money loan. It'll be fast. We don't need to worry about the title. His words hung in the air like smoke, and I felt my chest tighten. I knew exactly what that meant. A hard money loan wasn't just quick and easy, it was predatory. It was the kind of loan you took out when you didn't care about the consequences, when you needed money fast and didn't care if you were breaking the law. They were going to use the house as collateral despite the fact that they didn't legally own it. I had known for days now that this was the step that would lead them into criminal territory, but hearing it out loud, hearing it so casually discussed, made it all the more real. The truth was unfolding right before my eyes. They were digging themselves into a hole so deep they wouldn't be able to climb out. Brenda, her mind whirring with the idea of a quick fix, latched onto the idea without hesitation. She was already imagining what she could do with the money, how the debts would disappear, how she would finally be free of the pressure. And William, he was already dreaming of what he could spend his share on, probably a new car or another vacation, unaware of the storm he was about to walk into. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stood there, hidden in plain sight, watching this unfold. Every word they spoke, every plan they made was one more step closer to their downfall. And the best part, they didn't know I knew. They didn't know I was just waiting for the right moment. It would have been so easy to expose them then and there, to walk in and show them the will to call them out on their lies. But I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. I stayed calm, steady, the silence filling the space between us like a thick fog. The trap was closing. Slowly but surely. They were too arrogant to see it. As I watched them make their arrangements, I knew I had to act. It wasn't enough to just let them destroy themselves. They needed to understand the full weight of what they were doing. I had to give them a chance to make the wrong move. The moment came when Brenda made the call to the loan officer. I could hear her voice on the phone, tight with excitement, as she arranged the loan details, making sure the paperwork would be ready for signing that afternoon. My stomach churned, knowing that the moment they signed the crime would be complete. They didn't own the house, they didn't have the legal right to use it as collateral, but they didn't care. They thought they were untouchable. I felt the anger rising, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time for anger. This was the time for patience. I had one last card to play. I walked to the laundry room, closed the door behind me, and pulled out my phone. My fingers flew over the keys as I dialed the lawyer. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice calm but firm. "It's happening. They're taking out the loan. They're signing today." I didn't have to say anything else. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The trap was set. The moment was coming. I had done all I could to prepare. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment to strike. I hung up the phone, clicking off with a finality that echoed in my ears. I stood there for a moment, taking a breath, then walked back into the room where they were still making their plans. My silence was no longer a passive act. It was the calm before the storm. I was ready. The moment I had been waiting for arrived like a storm, sudden and violent. I had kept my silence for so long, watching and waiting as my mother and brother continued down their destructive path. But now, standing in that room with them, the weight of everything I had been holding back finally cracked. I felt my heart beat faster as I walked into the library, my eyes focused on Brenda and William, their faces flushed with excitement. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won, that they were untouchable. It was almost too easy the way they carried on, completely unaware of the trap that had been set for them. The final moment had come. I had waited for this day for them to make the fatal mistake, And now, it was time to bring it all crashing down. The loan had been signed, the money had been transferred. They were about to cash in on their fraud, and they had no idea that their fate was already sealed. I stepped into the room quietly, my heart pounding, but my face as calm as ever. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, as they laughed and talked about what they would do with the money. William was already planning his next move, talking about buying a new car, probably trying to avoid the inevitable reckoning that was coming. Brenda was gloating, her smile wide, as she imagined the freedom that would come with the loan. She didn't even notice me at first. I stood there just watching them, listening to their smug, self-assured chatter. And then, with a steady breath, I broke the silence. "You know," I said, my voice low but firm, "you should probably take a look at this." They turned to face me, and I could see the surprise in their eyes. They had never expected me to say anything, never imagined that I had been watching them all along. I reached into my bag, pulling out the old chessbook, the one they had thought was ruined, and opened it slowly, making sure they saw the contents inside. The will. The original notarized will. My grandfather's legacy, the very thing they had tried to erase. I could see the color drain from their faces as they realized what they were looking at. The truth. The proof of their fraud. The evidence they had been so sure I would never find. I placed the document on the table between us, my hand steady, my eyes locked onto theirs. Brenda's face twisted in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as she tried to find the words. William's arrogance faltered, replaced by a growing sense of panic. "This is the will, isn't it?" I asked, my voice cold. "The real one, the one you didn't know existed?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. Brenda looked at the paper, then back at me as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. She had thought she was invincible, that I was too small, too invisible to fight back. She was wrong. I could see the realization dawn on her, but it was too late. The trap had already sprung. You're lying," she stammered, her voice shaky. "This isn't real. It's a forgery." But I wasn't lying. I wasn't the one who had forged the deed or the loan documents. They were the ones who had been lying, manipulating everything to get what they wanted. I could feel the anger rise, but I kept it controlled. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. They had crossed a line they couldn't come back from. "You know," I said, taking a step closer, "you could have walked away, but you chose greed. You chose to take something that wasn't yours. And now you're going to have to face the consequences." Just as the words left my mouth, the door to the library burst open. Federal agents in their windbreakers stepped inside with a purpose, their faces grim, their movements coordinated. They moved like a machine, efficient and precise as they filed into the room. Brenda's eyes went wide with panic as the realization hit her. It wasn't just me she had to deal with now. "What is this?" she screamed, backing away from the agents. "Who are you?" But they didn't answer. Instead, they moved toward her, locking eyes with her, and then turning to William. I felt a rush of satisfaction, though I tried not to show it. The law had caught up with them. They were no longer in control. As the lead agent stepped forward, Brenda's voice broke through the silence again this time, shrill and desperate. "You can't do this. This is my house," she cried, but the agent simply shook his head. "No, it's not," he said, his voice firm. "This house belongs to your daughter." The words were like a hammer blow, shattering the last of her defenses. She stumbled back as if the weight of the truth had physically hit her. I watched her, the woman who had thought she could manipulate everyone, now crumbling before me. William, meanwhile, was still trying to maintain some semblance of control, but the smirk that had once been a constant on his face was gone. He was sweating now, his eyes darting around the room. He opened his mouth to speak, but the agent was already moving toward him. I didn't need to say another word. They had both been caught. The game was over. The agents took their time reading them, their rights, handcuffing them both with a cold finality that sent a chill through the room. As the cuffs clicked shut on William's wrists, the sound seemed to echo in my ears, a sound of justice being served. I could feel the weight of everything lifting off my shoulders, the anger and the hurt from all those years of being overlooked, of being treated like nothing. It was over. The truth had come to light, and they were the ones who would face the consequences. As they were led out of the room, Brenda's eyes met mine one last time, her face pale, her mouth twisted with hatred. "You little witch!" she spat, but I didn't flinch. I had already won. The house, the estate, everything was mine. But more than that, I had reclaimed my dignity, my place in this world. And that was the real victory. It's strange how something as simple as a house can mean so much, isn't it? At one point, this place was just a building to me, a symbol of my grandfather's life and legacy. But after everything that happened, it became something else entirely. It's no longer just a house, it's a fortress, a place of strength, a symbol of justice, and a reminder that even the quietest pieces in the game can come out on top. They thought they had everything figured out, my mother and brother, treating me like I was invisible, as though I wouldn't notice their lies, their greed. But they underestimated me. And more importantly, they underestimated the power of silence, of patience, of playing the long game. This house, now it's mine. But more than that, it's a sanctuary. The East Wing is being renovated, and soon it won't just be a home. It'll be a safe haven for women who've been through what I went through. Women escaping financial abuse, finding the strength to stand up and take back what's theirs. It'll be a place where they can rebuild their lives, just like I rebuilt mine. My mother, my brother, they'll never see it. They'll never understand. They thought I was weak because I didn't speak up when they expected me to. They thought I was stupid because I let them think they had all the power. But they forgot the most important lesson my grandfather taught me in chess. The quiet pieces are often the ones setting the trap. You don't need to flip the board to win. Sometimes all you need to do is wait for your opponent to make the wrong move. And when they do, you make your move. The rest takes care of itself. So as I sit here now, sipping tea from my mother's favorite cup in a home that's finally mine, I feel something I've never felt before. Peace. The battle's over. The monster's in chains. And for the first time in a long time, I'm free. If you've ever had to stand up against a bully, if you've ever had to fight for what's yours, then you know how this feels. And if this story has inspired you, made you think, or even just reminded you of your own strength, then share it. Let others know they're not alone. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. It's a journey worth taking. I'm not just rebuilding a house. I'm rebuilding everything. And trust me, this is just the beginning.